Welcome to another East Tradewinds presentation with Diesha Cooper from Executive.
I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and my private practice is in turnaround consulting as a fractional CFO and administrative officer. I got into this work about 4 years ago after a 20-year run in family business. I co-founded an industrial company as a teenager with my dad and did 11 years with him. Started out as the bookkeeper and the welder and ended up a general business administrator, and it was a pretty wild run with my family. My dad got involved in a cult. That's a whole other story. And basically, the pending Netflix series, if it was up to my friends, they keep begging for that show. But my dad cash stripped his business and moved out of state, down to Kentucky from Pennsylvania in 2014. And I went to his private lender, he was a default to, and bailed my dad out of debt and bought his business on a very large private note to his private lender. And 28 years old, I looked at my two younger brothers who are working in the business. They're 20 and 22. And I said, we're going to work harder and smarter, and you're going to listen to me, and you're going to work your butts off. Get busy. And that was my first turnaround. We started servicing our debts within 4 months of a negative cash situation, and also took it from, it was a couple 100,000 in revenue at the time when I bought it, and took it to a multi-million-dollar company over the next 7 years. When I sold to my partners, 20 years in the industrial sector was long enough for me with family, as you can only imagine what it's like. And my welding skills, while it makes me sound like I'm pretty tough and badass, I might be a little still thin-skinned when it comes to relationships. So I exited end of 2021 and took a 6-month sabbatical. Did a lot of kayaking to figure out, what do I want to do next with my life. I was kind of at that transition point. And I said, I know a lot about business administration and finance. I've been in the CFO role for a while. And I came back to work as a business consultant and got hired by a firm. It lasted 6 months there when I realized my entrepreneur streak is quite deeply embedded. And working for someone as a W-2 and just being the billable hours on in a big operating system was really not the vision that I had for myself. And in that 6 months that I worked for that firm, I met other people who were doing fractional work. And I was like, wait, what are you doing? You're not just telling people what to do, you're actually in there doing it. And I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. So I exited again the consulting firm and hung up my own shingle as a fractional CFO and started prospecting. It was really the first time in my life I've had to do sales or marketing for myself. Having, bought a business that had a full team, I was like, okay, now it's the person of one doing everything, consulting my clients, getting out there, networking. And, in the last couple of years have built a fairly successful consulting practice as a fractional. I think the thing that a lot of people want to hear from me, and I suppose probably this group too, is like, how do we avoid, as a turnaround consultant, I go in when there's fires burning, the cash has run out. We're saying, is this a bankruptcy situation, which sometimes it is, or is it something we can actually fix and turn around, which thankfully in my case, most of the times we are able to do a turnaround on these businesses. And the question is like, how do you see the writing on the wall? How do you know what you need to be looking for so that you don't end up distressed, especially when you're a founder or a very technical business owner and you don't necessarily understand finance or debt servicing and some of these things, and you can really get stuck. And I think for me, when I look at small businesses, one of the first things that we're looking at is, what is their cash flow? You can look profitable on paper, but one of the big things that happens is especially single member LLCs or small LLCs where owners take distributions off the balance sheet. It can look like they're profitable, but maybe they're making 20,000 in net income and they're taking home 40,000 or 50,000 off their balance sheet, and they're actually cash flow negative and they're struggling. And in my mind, if you've ever heard me talk or follow me on LinkedIn, one of the things I'm really keen on is that if you're going to be a business owner, you should pay yourself a reasonable wage. And when I say reasonable wage, I'm not talking about the IRS standard. I'm talking about what's the wage you go out and get replaced with if you took this job elsewhere, or if you hired someone to do this work in your company, whether that's, if that's $70,000 plus benefits and employer portion of health insurance or 401k matching, it often comes out to about $100,000 for a basic 70,000 wage, which in the US, I don't know about Canada, when we look across the board at operating managers, 70 to $80,000 is a pretty realistic small town income. And so over 86% of our US small businesses are taking home much less than that. Their entire revenue is less than 100,000, and the business owner themselves are paying themselves $30,000, $40,000 in hopes that they're building an investment for later. Basically, believe they're putting a sweat equity and they're all of their hopes and dreams are in the future rather than right now. It's the struggle. And only 10% of when we put our business up for sale in the US even sell. So most of them aren't even building an asset. The space that I work in primarily with larger turnarounds is between 1 to 20 million, which is a big range. And, I usually have about 20 million total in operating revenue that I'm managing. And it's really interesting to see how similar a business at 1.5 million revenue is to a business in 10 million in revenue when they're distressed. The things that we usually see are operational chaos. And this is the thing that I've gotten really fascinated with in the last year as I've begun to see patterns in the last few years as I've been working with small businesses where you have, say, a 20-year-old business where it's family or founder led businesses, and they've kind of patched together their operating architecture as they grew. So that, they start out, they're 100,000, they're 200,000, they're using these tech tools, they have certain ways of doing things, and then they get successful, they start building, but the profit isn't coming along with. And then they hit, a real growth spurt, and suddenly they're cash deprived and they're panicking. And that's when I get the call of like, what's wrong? We need help. Come in. I think we're going to have to file bankruptcy. And consistently what I see is they've gotten very excited about growth and put a lot of eggs in one basket and just gone all in for growth and not done it right. They haven't built the architecture to scale, to enjoy economies of scale. Instead, they're scaling up with increased labor costs. They're scaling up with increased technology costs, these things, instead of actually being able to optimize what they have and get production through. They're simply scaling everything at size. And so this becomes a really fascinating and very individual process for each of these companies is walking in and saying, okay, what works, what doesn't work, what can be optimized. And I think in my own evolution as the consultant slash executive leader, I am learning to step back. And instead of fixing processes, I'm beginning to question the entire operating architecture and say, if we were building this again today, would we build this system? I have a client right now that I've just been frustrated with trying to get financial reports from the controller. And I've taken a step back and I said, you know what? If I would walk in here tomorrow and buy this company, I would not take anything from their technology stack with me. I would say, I'll buy your product, but I won't buy your tech stack. I'll buy your customer list, but I won't take your CRM. I buy this, but I wouldn't take. And I said, well, then if I wouldn't buy this as an investor, why do we keep operating with it? What if we make my client's company 2.0 and we say on this date, we move everything into a new operating structure, just like if we had been acquired by someone, so that we can actually scale this thing because we can't go from 2 million to 10 million in the system that we have. And I think that the thing that just keeps standing out to me so much is the need for me to stay curious, to stay educated. I just completed a course with Harvard on agentic AI and finance, which was incredibly eye-opening, understanding how to work alongside AI agents to have more profitable companies and to delegate mundane tasks to. And again, it comes back to operating architecture and what the future of our architecture looks like for businesses as we commingle both AI workers and human workers with humans moving into more creative and intuitive roles that will increase profitability, that will increase work-life balance, productivity, all of these things. So I think like for me, I'm really leading with curiosity and working to understand what is it that is going to move the needle for businesses as we see more and more distressed companies coming out as through this huge tech change that's happening across the world right now in the boom of technology and AI led technology. And how do small businesses capture some of that profitability and revolutionize their businesses in a way that founders and small business owners will be able to enjoy a work-life balance, enjoy profitability and those things. Anyway, that's a little in a nutshell what I do, some of the things that I'm learning. The other thing I want to talk about, I have this little itch to be an entrepreneur besides consulting, because when you're in the numbers and spreadsheets all day long, it gets a little mind numbing. Um, and I've been really drawn to working with product companies and more advanced manufacturing because my previous company was in industrial services with services and inventory and parts and all these things. One of my clients is in e-commerce. And about a year and a half ago, I said to myself, you just need to know more about e-commerce. Like as a CFO, I was really good at the numbers. And I came in and I was like, okay, we need more revenue. We need better marketing. And I started looking at courses that I could take to learn more. And then in this process, I said, well, why not launch a product and learn that way? You could learn e-commerce, you could learn marketing. So I said, all right, I'm going to try this. What would I launch? And I said, what's something you want? And I said, you know what I've really been wanting is a travel cup that's glass. And every time I order them, they come with like a weird top or a silicone top, which I hate drinking out of silicone. Feels so terrible. And I hate drinking out of metal travel cups because they smell bad and they leak around your mouth and the mouth feels terrible. Anyway, so I developed this. It's a glass travel cup with a glass top, silicone band to seal it, double wall glass in the bottom. It's called Siplux if you want to check out my website. It's iplux.com. And I have been on a journey of learning designed production, outsourced manufacturing in China, importing, navigating tariffs, and then launching a Shopify store, learning all the apps, the integrations, how it integrates to finance, and I think most importantly, paid advertising, which is brand new for me in my career. I've been consuming every book and different thing that I can read on this. And we're hitting a forecast of six figures now with our monthly sales. So it's making progress. And I think this has been one of the most curious parts of my career is that I've never been in a role where I launched something myself. I've always been facilitating other people and their products, their ideas. Even in my family business, I was the one that brought the product or service to market, made sure the books were sound, our services were sound, but I've never been that creative role and learned marketing. So this has been something that's been really good for me and expanded my mindset, definitely made me a better CFO as I understand systems and architecture better and understand how to spend marketing dollars in turnaround situations where you do need to get revenue moving again. I'm pretty excited about the expansion of my own education and the product because I'm in love with it. And I now have my sister working part-time for me, shipping out boxes. But if anyone has questions or wants to more, have dialogue or hear more about my practice, I'm happy to engage.
We thank you for watching. We meet every Tuesday between 8 and 9 a.m. Eastern. There is no cost and an option to become a speaker too. Find East Trade Wins on LinkedIn.